They say some stories are told to teach lessons, but some stories are whispered in the dark, told in hushed voices, because they are too terrifying to speak out loud. This is one of those stories. Long, long ago, but not too long ago. Somewhere deep in the heart of Umuozara, a small but vibrant African village, there was a great kingdom of Obiora. This was not just any kingdom. It was a land of wealth and wisdom, known for its vast yam farms, palm oil trade, and the songs of the elders that carried through the winds. But beneath the beauty of Umuozara, a terrible secret lay buried. In the center of this kingdom, hidden behind towering walls and mighty iron gates, stood the great palace of King Obiora. And locked away inside that palace, in a room so dark that even the sun feared to enter, was the king's only daughter, Princess Nneka. They called her the Cursed One. People spoke of her in fear. Some said she was a ghost, others believed she was a witch. But the truth was far worse than any rumor. Many years ago, when Princess Nneka was just a child, a mysterious woman arrived in Umuozara. She was no ordinary woman, she was a sorceress, known only as Mama Ejimofor. No one knew where she came from, no one knew why she had come, but when she left, the kingdom would never be the same. One fateful night, thunder roared, and the skies wept. The sorceress appeared in the palace, standing before the mighty King Obiora, her red eyes burning like fire. "Your Majesty," she hissed, her voice sharp like a broken calabash. "You have taken something from me, and now, I shall take something from you." Before the king could even raise his staff, before the guards could draw their spears, she stretched out her withered hand, and cursed Princess Nneka. A curse so dark, so powerful, that it wrapped around the child like the coils of a python. The once beautiful princess, with skin as smooth as fresh palm oil, and eyes as bright as the morning sun, was transformed into a hideous old woman, with wrinkled skin, crooked bones, and a voice that sent chills through the soul. From that day, Princess Nneka was never seen again. The king, filled with shame and sorrow, locked her away in the highest tower of the palace, far from the eyes of the people. No one spoke of her. No one dared whisper her name. But legends spread. Rumors grew. It was said that any man who could pass 3 deadly trials would break the curse, free the princess, and inherit the entire kingdom. But if he failed, he would suffer a fate worse than death. Somewhere in the outskirts of Umuozara, there lived 2 brothers, Obiora and Chijok. Oh, but these were no ordinary brothers. Obiora, the elder, was tall and strong, but he was selfish and full of pride. He walked like he was the king of the land, boasting about his strength, his beauty, and his unmatched wisdom. Chijok, on the other hand, was gentle, kind, and full of heart. He was the type who helped the old women fetch water, who shared his food with the beggars, and who never spoke an unkind word to anyone. One day, news of the cursed princess reached their village. Obiora's eyes shone with greed. "If I break the curse, I will become the next king," he boasted. Their frail old father begged him, "My son, do not go. No man has ever returned from that castle." But Obiora laughed, took the family's only horse, a sharp machete, and set off. But he did not go alone. On his journey, he encountered a dying vulture. It lay by the roadside, its wings broken, struggling to move. "Help me, young traveler," the vulture croaked. But Obiora kicked dirt in its face. "You are of no use to me," he spat. Further along, he saw a helpless tortoise, trapped under a fallen log. "Help me, young man," the tortoise whispered. But Obiora laughed cruelly. "Foolish creature. You move too slow to be of any help." He continued on his journey, ignoring every plea, every cry, every chance to do good. When he reached the gate of the curse palace, the doors creaked open, and out stepped a dark, hooded figure. And that was the last time anyone ever saw him. Days passed. Weeks turned to months. And Obiora never returned. At home, their father wept bitterly, until one day, Chijok, the younger brother, the one with a gentle heart, stood up and said, "Father, I must go and find my brother." Their father fell to his knees. "No. I cannot lose you too." But Chijok smiled. "Do not worry, Papa. I will return." With nothing but a loaf of bread and his kindness, he set off toward the curse palace. But what he did not know was that his journey would change the fate of the kingdom forever. Chijok stepped onto the same path his brother once walked, but his heart was different. He was not driven by greed or power. He did not seek a throne. He did not seek riches. He only wanted to find his brother and bring him home. Chijok walked with steady steps, his heart light, his mind clear. He carried only a small sack slung over his shoulder, containing one loaf of bread and a wooden flask of water. He had no sword, no horse, no armor. And yet, he had something far greater than any weapon. He had kindness. The path was long and lonely, stretching across rolling hills and deep forest. Along the way, he encountered a wounded vulture, its wing bent at an awkward angle, its breathing labored. The bird flapped weakly, struggling to rise. "Please, traveler, help me," it croaked. Chijok did not hesitate. He knelt down, gently lifted the vulture into his hands, and wrapped it in his own cloth. He tore a strip from his tunic and bound its broken wing. "There," he said softly. "You will heal." The vulture blinked at him, surprised. "You are different from the others," it whispered. "If you ever need me, call my name, and I shall come." With that, the bird took one last glance at him before hobbling into the safety of the trees. And so, Chijok continued. Not long after, he came across a small tortoise, its shell cracked, struggling beneath a fallen tree branch. The poor creature was too weak to escape on its own. "Please, help me," the tortoise whispered. Without hesitation, Chijok knelt down and lifted the branch, setting the tortoise free. "You are safe now," he said gently. The tortoise gazed up at him, its old, wise eyes filled with gratitude. "A heart as pure as yours will never walk alone," it said. "Call for me, and I shall come." Chijok bowed his head and continued forward. For every step he took, the path grew darker. The trees whispered. The winds howled. But Chijok did not waver. Finally, after days of walking, Chijok reached the gates of the cursed castle. Unlike the stories he had heard, the castle was not grand or beautiful. It was dark, crumbling, and covered in vines. The air smelled of dust and old magic. And yet, despite its ruin, the gate still stood tall, as if waiting. Chijok knocked politely and waited. The massive doors creaked open on their own, revealing a long, winding corridor lined with stone statues. Statues of men. Statues of warriors. Statues of those who had come before him, and never left. And at the very center of them was his brother. Obiora's face was frozen in horror, his body trapped in cold, gray stone. Chijioke's heart clenched. "Brother," he whispered, "I will not leave you here." But before he could move, a shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. And from the darkness, she came. The hooded figure of the sorceress, Mama Ejimofor, stepped into the dim light. Her voice was like cracking firewood, old and sharp. "Oh, another foolish boy," she murmured. "Have you come to fail, like the others?" Chijok stood his ground. "I have come to find my brother," he said firmly. "And I will face whatever trials you set before me." The sorceress chuckled, a sound like rustling dead leaves. "Then let the games begin." And with a wave of her hand, the first trial began. The sorceress snapped her fingers, and suddenly, the ground began to shake. The castle walls melted away, replaced by an endless barren desert. The air was dry and heavy, the sky dark and endless. Chijok found himself standing alone, and then, the storm came. Out of nowhere, violent winds roared, swirling sand and dust into the air. The storm was not ordinary, it whispered, it screamed, it cried. "You will never succeed. You are weak. Turn back before it is too late." The voices were the cries of those who had failed. The storm grew stronger, trying to push Chijok down. The ground shifted beneath his feet. He could barely breathe. He could barely stand. But then, a shadow circled above him. The vulture, the one he had saved. With a mighty cry, the vulture spread its wings, creating a barrier against the storm. "I will not let you fall," it screeched. And so, Chijok pressed forward, through the storm, step by step, until he reached the other side. The storm vanished. The castle returned. And the sorceress, Mama Ejimofor, looked shocked. "No one has ever passed the first trial," she whispered. But Chijok only dusted himself off and smiled. "What's next?" And so, the second trial began. Chijok had passed the first trial, something no man had ever done before. But he was not safe yet. No. The sorceress Mama Ejimofor still stood before him, her ancient, wrinkled face twisted in disbelief. She narrowed her sharp, sunken eyes, her long bony fingers tightening around the black staff she carried. The air around them crackled with unseen power. "You are more clever than I thought," she muttered. "But do not grow proud, boy. The first trial was only a test of endurance. The second." She leaned in, her lips curling into a wicked grin. "The second will test your heart." The sorceress snapped her fingers, and the world shifted again. The castle walls melted into darkness. The ground beneath Chijok's feet disappeared, and suddenly, he found himself standing at the edge of a massive lake. The water was black as night, its surface swirling like thick oil. But it was not just any lake. From deep within the water, figures began to rise, pale, ghostly hands stretching toward the sky, faces twisted in agony. The voices of the forgotten, the lost, the cursed. This was the lake of lost souls. The sorceress stood beside him, her voice a mere whisper in the wind. "Somewhere in this lake, I have hidden a golden stone. Find it, and you will pass. Fail, and you will join the others." And before Chijok could even breathe, she was gone. Chijok stared at the lake, his heart pounding. The water moved unnaturally, rippling as if something beneath it was alive. He took a deep breath. He had no choice. He stepped into the lake. The moment his foot touched the water, the lake came alive. Hands shot up from the depths, grabbing at his legs. Cold fingers, lifeless grips, desperate whispers. Help us. Save us. Don't leave us behind. The lake pulled him deeper, deeper, deeper. And then, he heard it. A voice. Not of a spirit. Not of a monster. But of a friend. The tortoise. Hold on, Chijok, the voice called. From the shore, the same tortoise he had saved earlier was paddling toward him, its strong shell glowing faintly. Climb onto my back, the tortoise urged. I will carry you. With the last of his strength, Chijok grabbed onto the tortoise, pulling himself above the cursed waters. And then, he saw it. Beneath the rippling waves, a faint golden glow. The golden stone. Chijok took a deep breath and reached for it. The hands grabbed at him, the spirits howled, but just before they could pull him under, his fingers wrapped around the stone. The moment he touched it, the lake froze. The voices stopped. The world shook. And then, Chijok found himself back in the castle, standing before the sorceress, the golden stone clutched tightly in his hands. And for the first time in centuries, the sorceress looked afraid. Mama Ejimofor's wrinkled hands trembled, her lips pressing into a thin line. You are not like the others, she admitted. But she was not finished yet. The final test was yet to come. With a wave of her hand, she led Chijok through the long, winding corridors of the castle. Torches flickered with ghostly blue flames, casting long, stretching shadows. At last, they reached a massive stone door. It was carved with ancient symbols, the language of old magic. 3 stone arms stretched out from it, one thin and delicate, one twisted and clawed, and one withered with age. Behind this door is the cursed princess. Mama Ejimofor's voice was barely a whisper. Choose the right hand, and the princess will be freed. Choose the wrong one. She smiled darkly. And you will take her place. Chijok's heart pounded. Which hand belonged to the princess? Which was the right choice? He closed his eyes, and thought. If it were his brother standing here, he would choose the most beautiful hand. If it were a greedy man, he would choose the most delicate hand. But Chijok knew better. The princess was cursed. That meant she would not look like a princess at all. He took a deep breath, and reached for the withered, old hand. The ground shook. The castle walls trembled. A piercing scream rang through the air, and suddenly, the old woman before him began to change. The wrinkles melted away. The hunched back straightened. The long, twisted fingers became smooth and strong. And before him, standing tall, proud, and radiant, was Princess Nneka. The curse was broken. The goblin guards shrieked and fled, the statues crumbled, and the kingdom itself seemed to breathe once more. And just like that, the spell was broken. The princess had been freed. As the last traces of dark magic disappeared, the once gloomy castle was bathed in golden sunlight. The air, once thick with curses and sorrow, was now fresh and filled with hope. But oh, what a sight it was! Princess Nneka, now restored to her true self, stood before Chijok. Her rich brown skin glowed like the morning sun, her eyes filled with gratitude. She was not just beautiful, she was powerful. You freed me, she whispered, staring at her own hands in disbelief. Chijok smiled, his heart full. Not just me, he said. I had help. And then, the statues that lined the hall, one by one, began to crack. their stone forms crumbled, revealing flesh, blood, and life beneath. Among them, Obiora. The elder brother gasped for breath, his body trembling as he returned to life. His once arrogant eyes were now wide with shock and regret. He turned and saw his younger brother. Chijok, he whispered. For the first time in his life, Obiora was speechless. And then, before anyone could stop him, he fell to his knees. You saved me. Chijok knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. No, brother. I only did what you would have done if your heart had been different. And in that moment, Obiora understood. With Princess Nneka free, the curse lifted from the land. The once withered fields bloomed, the skies turned clear, and the people of Umuozara rejoiced. A grand celebration was held. Princess Nneka stood before the entire kingdom, her voice clear, strong, and full of power. For years, I have been lost in darkness, but this man, she turned to Chijok, this man has shown me that true strength is not in swords or power, but in kindness and wisdom. The elders nodded in agreement, the people cheered, and the king himself rose from his throne. He turned to Chijok. You have passed the greatest test of all, he declared. A test of the heart. And so, with the entire kingdom watching, the king removed his golden crown and placed it upon Chijok's head. And just like that, the boy who had left home with nothing but a loaf of bread and a heart full of kindness became the greatest ruler Umuozara had ever known. But what of Obiora? Oh, my friends. Obiora had changed. The once arrogant young man, who had once sought power for himself, now dedicated his life to serving others. He spent his days helping the poor, teaching the children, and ensuring that no man in the kingdom ever walked alone. And so, my friends, the kingdom was not just saved by magic, but by the power of a single, kind heart. Now tell me, my dear champions, what did we learn today? The lesson is simple. Kindness is stronger than power. Humility will take you farther than pride. And those who help others will never walk alone. So, the next time you see a small bird struggling, or a stranger in need, remember this tale. For one day, you may find yourself facing a trial of your own, and you will see that kindness is the greatest magic of all. My wonderful champions, if you enjoyed this story, if it made you smile, made you think, or even gave you chills, then please don't forget to do 3 things. Like this video. Share it with someone who loves a good story. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more mind-blowing African folktales. Until next time, my friends, keep watching, keep learning, and never stop believing in the power of a good story.